Good morning and welcome to the Football Digest podcast. And I tell you what, if the show is half as lively as the row we've just had off air over TV coverage, bias, I'm not sure Andy will get into this because otherwise we'll ruin his column. But his column will be a good read to be honest tomorrow. Blimey, don't miss that. But we are gonna touch on kind of commentary. TV coverage a little bit later as that and finally slot, but there's lots to go at first actually with Liverpool. What's gone wrong there? Blimey, did they put some of it right last night against RB Leipzig? Certainly looked it. What a great night for the Champions League. Man City, is the quadruple still on? Big week for Chelsea. Let's have some Man United chat and North London derby. Looking at that, plenty to chew over and discuss with my colleague Andy Dunn, chief sports writer of the Daily Mirror, Jeremy Cross, chief sports writer of the Daily Star, Matt Dunn, football aficionado, Rothman's collector supreme of the Daily Express. Morning to you guys. Thanks so much for joining. It's nice to see you all. Andy's ready for the reopening of golf courses, as you might see. If you're watching, if not, then as a Belisha beacon, missing some dye there on that t-shirt. Right, guys, let's start with Liverpool. What's gone wrong? I mean, what's gone right? And frankly, if ever there was a week in the life of Jurgen Klopp and Anfield, and they finally win a home game, but it's 1,000 miles from home. I don't know whether that tells us something really, whether it's kind of all in the mind or what else really, because that was a very, very impressive result against RB Leipzig, who I have to say look very, very average to me. Very surprising that, bearing in mind the previous results and performances, which have been quite good. Was that Liverpool or was that RB Leipzig looking poor? I don't know quite. But guys, what do we think? It's Andy, you covered it, you watched it, didn't you? It's where do you think we're going there with Liverpool? Has this season told us that Jurgen Klopp needs a bit of a reboot? What's required?
In a broad sense, yes. Just specifically, let's talk about what happened last night and the changes that were made. And everything is with the caveats, as you quite rightly say, is that RB Leipzig, quite how they're within one win, I think 2 points off Bayern Munich at the top of the Bundesliga, 8 points clear of the third place team. It's quite hard to fathom, judged on the evidence of those two games, the first and second legs against Liverpool. We shouldn't just judge them on that, but certainly, they look nowhere near, say, the standard that would be required to be second in the Premier League. And I'm not a great one for saying that our league's any better than any other top European league, but it certainly looked that way. All throughout the team, they were very, very disappointing. And when we think that much lauded players like Upamecano, really didn't fail to justify all the hype that we've seen. Yet he's going to Bayern Munich, and they don't make many mistakes, and they've seen enough of him to take him. So we can maybe write that off as a couple of bad games for him, although he did make a few interceptions last night, and a couple of bad games for Nagelsmann and Leipzig. So that's the first thing to say is that they didn't play particularly well. However, if you then go on one specific element to last night's game, I think that maybe will be something you can actually broaden out for the whole run that Liverpool have had, is that you've got Fabinho in central midfield. And that's the first time he's played there since the Merseyside derby when Virgil van Dijk was injured by Jordan Pickford. Now, you cannot lay all Liverpool's problems at the door of that A, injury, and B, tactical reshuffle that Klopp thought was necessary to have Fabinho play in the centre of defence. But by the looks of it, by the evidence of last night, and by the evidence of the games that they've lost, it's got a hell of a lot to do with it. I mean, it really has. It goes without saying that if you take Fabinho out of that centre midfield and put him in central defence, your central defence is not only weakened, because as good as he is there, he's no Virgil van Dijk. So that is, you're not as good there anyway. But then you're missing him from the centre midfield. And particularly, in some of those games that they've lost, you've actually looked at it and you thought, it just doesn't work, this having Fabinho and, when he was fit, Henderson there, because you are losing those two key players out of the midfield, and you're not putting enough pressure on the ball there in that area, which is always Liverpool's thing. So when you haven't got that pressure on the ball there, teams find it very easy to get the ball there and then take advantage of your high line. And Chelsea did it perfectly in their win at Anfield. So I think what you would take, if there's one tactical element to last night's game that you would broaden out and say this has had a big influence on Liverpool's domestic struggles, it's Fabinho and the restoration of Fabinho to midfield last night, playing alongside an outstanding Gini Wijnaldum. Thiago had a bit more freedom than he would possibly have in the Premier League, and he hasn't enjoyed that in the Premier League. But certainly, if you're Jurgen Klopp, surely you look at that and you think, you know what, the Fabinho centre-half tactic, ruse, trick, call it what you want, we can't go back to that. Liverpool cannot go back to that, he must be thinking. And I think that's the biggest takeout from that, because fundamentally, that was a performance last night that was, it was the old days, wasn't it? I mean, it was the old days. It was, substitute Firmino, Jota in for Firmino, and you've got, Mane and Salah flying. They're creating a lot of chances. And again, even though it was a home game, the onus was on Leipzig to come out Liverpool. Obviously, the venue wasn't at home, and they were allowed to attack Leipzig on the counter, which of course they did. Remember in that first half when Jota just pinged one over the top there, and Thiago, wasn't it, I think? And Salah was clear. So they won't get that freedom in the Premier League. But what I would say, John, is that would be my most important take from that, watching that last night's game, is Fabinho, central midfield, nowhere else.
No, you've got to play him there, haven't you?
Yes.
And maybe find a way centre half wise to do that. I'll tell you what, Jeremy, it's also interesting that basically I've been sort of noting this with interest, really. And just thinking, if I had a £1 coin for every pundit who starts a question by saying, now, we're not going to say that Jurgen Klopp's job is on the line or that Jurgen Klopp is under pressure, but we're going to say exactly that and then pose the question. So to me, that is playing, you're being a scaredy cat there. You're playing at journalism, really. You want to ask the question, but you're too afraid to do so. So come on, step forward. I mean, it's ridiculous, isn't it? I think that basically Liverpool, in my mind, are never, ever going in that territory because of what they've achieved in the last couple of seasons. The title, the Champions League. I mean, in my view, he's got a statue for life. But, I don't think that, personally, I don't feel that there I am examining it myself. But I personally don't feel he's under any threat. And therefore, what Liverpool need to do next is completely re-examine the squad, isn't it?
If you had £1 for every time somebody said that, you'd be even richer than you already are.
I wish, Jeremy.
Yeah, look, it's almost ridiculous to even question Klopp's position there because, like you said, he's transformed that team since he took over. Last season they were the best team in the world. He's had difficult circumstances to contend with this season, on and off the pitch. Yes, they've had a terrible run. Yes, he made a mistake in probably not strengthening when they were at the top. Didn't take the team on in terms of making it stronger, having a deeper squad. I think that was a mistake. And also he's been accused of not being flexible enough in terms of adapting to different situations. He's quite stubborn in his approach and doesn't seem to have a plan B, let alone a plan C. He thinks it works. He's still convinced it will. And he will be thinking already about next season and who he's going to get back. They'll be a force again next season for sure. Van Dijk will make such a difference. Gomez. Henderson will be back in midfield. I'm not sure about the front three, to be honest. I'm not sure if they're going to be still there all in that unit next season. I'm not sure, but
that's my point. That's my point. I think I'm not sure that the last couple of weeks has played out well for Salah. I don't think he's been a great.
His agent's not doing him any favours, has he?
No, absolutely. And sometimes you get that, don't you, as a barometer?
What worries me about Liverpool?
They need a shake-up. They've been so great, but every amazing thing comes to an end, doesn't it?
Well, look, they are a team going down. They're not still on the rise. They've hit their peak, and they are now, going in reverse. We've seen that clearly this season. And look, it's hard. We know how hard it is to stay at those levels. That they play with such intensity, and they've achieved so much. You can't carry that on for 4 or 5 years. It's impossible. What he needs to do is create a team. He needs to know that he has the backing of the owners in the summer, and he can sign. I'm not saying they need mass signings. They need 2 or 3 top quality players probably, because as we've seen with City this season, your squad is so important, and that's why City are running away with it, because they can make 5 or 6 changes. They can absorb 3 or 4 injuries and still be a force. And that's the issue for Liverpool. They don't have enough strength in depth. So that's something he needs to look at in the summer. Will the board back him? Who knows? I mean, they had ages to line up someone to replace Van Dijk, didn't they? They had months and months. They knew how long he was going to be out for, and they didn't sign anyone. Not they did at the end, but nothing of any significance. So that would worry me as a Liverpool fan. But what would also worry me as a Liverpool fan is last night they played like a team who were playing in the only competition left to win this season. So the players probably still think they can get to the final, maybe win it even. I don't think they will. That defence is not good enough to win the Champions League, because you can't bluff your way through a Champions League. The quality is too high. So, but yeah, look, they're in the league. The league's gone now. It went ages ago, and they're performing like a team that in the league just wants the season to get to a conclusion so they can reboot in the summer. Yeah. Whereas last night, that's the only trophy they can win this season. So they raised the game. They look more like their old selves, and they played really well. So yeah, there are issues to deal with. But to answer your original question, Klopp has got so much credit in the bank, and I can't imagine how bad it would have to get for them to even think about sacking him.
No, a lot worse than this.
Yeah,
I have to say. But Matt, one big burning issue is Wolves Monday night is huge in the context of, can Liverpool make top 4? They need to start winning games. It's away from home, so they'll be a relief probably. But they do need to start winning some games, Matt, don't they?
Well, I mean, they started last night, didn't they? And that'll make a big difference to the mood. What I'd say about Klopp is this next season is the measure of whether he's a good football manager or a great football manager. I think the key to being a great football manager, as Jeremy was alluding to, was changing things up and reinventing sides, as Pep has done this season, as Sir Alex Ferguson did about 4 or 5 times during his tenure at Manchester United. He's got to be ready to make the changes. I mean, no one's talking about getting rid of Jurgen Klopp, but he has to hold his hands up. He can't just come out last night and say, everyone knows that, it's clear that Fabinho is one of the greatest number 6s in the world. Well, if it's that clear, don't stick him in central defence. You're effectively making Harry Kane take corners. It's that kind of decision, isn't it? You've got someone who is a world-class player. You put him in his world-class position. So that's a mistake by the manager, and I think Klopp has to hold his hands up to that, because with that whole way he handled that Virgil van Dijk, I think he thought he was getting away with one by thinking, we can tuck him in there. But actually, he's paid the big bucks to see the bigger picture. And I think he's taken his eye off the ball on that one, and he needs to hold his hand up. Doesn't make him a bad manager. And, lesson learned, he can go again in the summer. But I do think he needs to freshen things up. In terms of the run-in for this season, I disagree with Jeremy. I don't think you have to be the best team. I think you can bluff your way to the Champions League. Chelsea weren't the best team in Europe in 2012. Liverpool weren't the best team in the competition in 2005. They were... you win a few lucky games. That Barcelona have gone. That's a big sort of tea giant, although not shade of their former selves. Luck of the draw. A hard fought win or a draw. Backs against the wall. Lucky ball over the line decision like Liverpool got back in, I think was that 2005 or 2007 at Chelsea, to get to the final. And suddenly you're there. So I think their best chance is beginning to look like finishing. Winning the Champions League is their best chance of getting there. That said, they'll want to finish top 4. They won't want to be relying on that. They want to fight on all sides. So, Wolves is a big game. But I think they can go into that game on a far better footing after last night's result. And I think a lot of the psychological damage, will be off them until they get back to Anfield and have that particular run to end. Because the sooner that ends, the sooner their problems finish.
Yeah, I guess they have to seize this opportunity as a step forward. It felt like we've been here a few times before and they've not seized that opportunity. I am going to sort of switch because we've got so much to talk about today to Man City. Jeremy, you were at the Etihad last night, weren't you? And it's been an interesting week actually, isn't it? Because Man City actually finally lose a football match, which has been remarkable. And at times, Southampton flirted with giving them a bit of a game, didn't they? They sort of gave them a bloody nose on a couple of occasions, sort of particularly defensively. So, has this week told us anything? Because we're probably before the last weekend we were sort of saying, "Oh, quadruple," it's on. Has this week told us that they're not absolutely indestructible and the top four, winning all four is going to be hard?
Yeah, look, they're human. They're just a football. They're a very, very good football team. But look, they deserved a loss to United. Fair play to United. It will kill Guardiola that the run was ended by United of all teams, because I know United are second in the table, but they're a pretty average team. United, in my opinion, they're not a wonderful side to watch in particular. So. But so that will disappoint him. But he was fair enough afterwards. He said, "Look, congratulations to them. They deserved it," and then he was right. They had an off day. It was just one of those days that they just didn't click. And you can't be wonderful every week. That's just a fact of life, isn't it? But last night actually, it was funny because after about 20 minutes, Southampton were actually dominating the ball, and we were looking at each other in the press box, going, "This might be something special here going on."
We might have to do some work here.
In crisis. But and then fair play to Southampton. Obviously the last time they were in Manchester, they got tonked 9-0, so it's not the place they'd want to be. But they played well, Southampton. They showed signs overall. I know they lost 5-2 in the end, but they showed signs that, we'll probably come on to the relegation thing later, but they showed signs that they'll probably stay up. They've got enough quality and enough endeavour. But no, City, look, they're just scoring. They scored in bursts, and they scored twice in 10 minutes before half time, and it was game over, really, to be honest, by then. But yeah, look, quadruple. I just think it's possible. I mean, it's crazy we're even talking about it, but they've won the league probably, haven't they, already? You'd fancy them to beat Tottenham at Wembley. They're still in the FA Cup, obviously. The Champions League remains, like we said before, the monkey on their backs. But like Matt said earlier, it's not the normal Champions League this season, is it? Teams aren't playing at home. There's no fans. Bayern Munich, the holders, aren't playing that well, really, by their standards. Juventus have gone out. Barcelona have gone out. So, the path looks clear for them to have a really, really good chance of winning the Champions League. But, strange things have happened to City in the Champions League in recent seasons, and you wouldn't be confident they could go on and win it. They should in theory, because they're the best team in Europe probably at the minute. But, it doesn't always pan out like you think, does it? But, look, they're back on the horse, aren't they? They're back to winning ways, and I don't think you can read anything into that defeat to United. It was just one of those days where things just didn't work out for them.
Yeah, it did feel like they're back on the horse, Andy, didn't it? I mean, City have been so dominant. We had to have a blip sooner or later, but it's straight back on.
Yeah, but and when you say a blip, it was a blip, and you're right. These things, law of averages suggest that you're going to lose a game at some point, and also there's going to be circumstances that will contribute to you losing a game. I mean, watching that game on Sunday or reflecting on it, the fact of the matter is, United, everyone says they deserved it. Well, yeah, they deserved it. They won the game, so their game plan worked. But let's face it. I mean, without Gabriel Jesus's rather, bizarre intervention inside a minute, when a player is covered by 2-3 defenders. I mean, let's face it. It was a brainstorm from Gabriel Jesus that has sent United ahead within a minute. That changes the whole dynamic of the game. Yes. So, there's no. What I'm trying to say is there's no legislating for that sort of individual mistake. You would expect City to come back from that, and they didn't. So United deserved it to that extent. Though, the one thing that really strikes me, and I was thinking about this when we were talking about Liverpool as well. Is what I think is amazing this season about Manchester City is how many fit players they've got.
Yeah.
I mean, last weekend, ahead of the Manchester derby, Guardiola gave his press conference, and he said, he had an entirely fit squad. And when you bear in mind, his squad is about the size of the UN Congress or whatever, that is some numbers to have entirely fit. Even Nathan Ake was fit, if you can remember.
I was going to say, even Nathan Ake.
Nathan who?
Yeah.
I mean,
didn't he used to play in the Premier League?
Even he's fit. No, honestly, no word of a lie. I wrote a column the other day in which Nathan Ake, and I can't quite remember why he did, but he featured quite prominently in it. Oh, I was writing about John Stones and how he must have felt when Nathan Ake was signed. And Nathan Ake featured quite prominently. And my dad rang me up and said, isn't he still at Bournemouth? I mean, and I said, well, no, he's not. It's an easy mistake to make. I know, but going back to it, I thought to myself, and then I was thinking about Liverpool and about their injuries. And, obviously, in addition to Van Dijk, there are several other injuries. I mean, Gomez and Henderson, and they've had injuries, throughout the season, clusters of injuries going on, and other teams have maybe not massive amounts, but I just thought that if you're thinking the first weekend in March, okay, the fixtures are a bit delayed because we started late, but even so, with only 11 games left, what squad could possibly, everyone is fit, and that's just that is just a huge help. I mean, it also made me think as well. Sorry,
they've had COVID,
and they've had COVID as well. So no one's got COVID anymore. No one's. And they have, and so every game now we get the same narrative, don't we? You can, and now before the game, you can write every story on social media. Just look at City's bench. Wow. Yeah. So you can cut and paste that comment for every single game now. They could have and City's bench is unbelievable. That also made me think, all those people who were on Pep's side saying you should be allowed 5 substitutes. Well, I mean, can you imagine if he had 5 substitutes? He could have put 5 on at once against United. So it's a good job that didn't happen.
Do you think it's down to luck, or obviously his luck comes into it, but do you think it's also down to how he manages his players, how he trains them?
Well, I agree with you, Jeremy. I agree 100%. But Andy, you'd say
no. Go on. Wait, and that's what in a long-winded way. That's exactly what I was going to come on to. Is that if you're say someone like Klopp, and you're going to look at that and think, okay, there's bad luck involved, isn't it? I mean, you can't legislate for Pickford on Van Dijk, for example. You can't legislate for certain injuries happening. That is just, collision injuries, for example. That just happens in any circumstance. But there comes a time when people have to look at Man City and think, other teams, and think, well, what are they doing different? Are they doing something different? And basically, I would have thought it's investing in the best. It's investing in the best research medically, investing in the best people to look after them. That is all part now of very much a part of the modern game, is having your players fit and ready to go. Having them recovering from injury as quickly as possible, having as many players as you can in peak condition, managing, when players aren't, maybe at their best, and when to have them inside and out. And of course, when you've got that many numbers, it helps that you can make 5 or 6 changes every single game, which Guardiola is now doing. I would have thought it averages about 6 every game.
Yeah, I totally.
Hey, by the way, just one. I'll end on this, but it also becomes a feat of management if you can then keep all those players happy.
Yeah. Yes, it really does. It's interesting because I think the commentator's introduction for every single game is Man City have made 5 changes today.
Yeah.
It's remarkable. I mean, Absolutely. They do it in defence at least 1 or often 2. They make shift around the sort of kind of the midfield, even a shape.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll play with Jesus up front. Sometimes they'll play a false 9. It's every single week. And frankly, just to prove, we do look at the readers' comments. We've had one here from Anthony Callahan that basically says City man for man are not a truly great team. However, the manager has a unique style of play. That's the mystery that other managers need to fix. Without Guardiola, there'll be a different animal. It's a view. I'm not sure, the discussion we've had, we necessarily agree with that, Anthony. Another one is Alan Chamberlain, really. Lucky ball over the line 2005. Embarrassing comment. I think he must be looking at you, Matt. But if it wasn't a goal, it wouldn't have been a penalty.
That's right.
It would have been sent off. I was there. I was there. I remember it too well, Alan.
Those are the five marks.
But no, it was. You know what?
Garcia. Man scores goal shock.
One of the great, absolutely one of the great, European stories. Liverpool.
Just to finish,
Alan's got a point though.
Tell me
one last thing. People have quickly forgotten, and this is the ultimate compliment to how good they have been this season. David Silva left last season, one of the greatest players to ever play in English football, and they have not missed him one job. And that speaks volumes for how good they have been and how he's turned them over and tweaked them and adapted to losing Silva, because he was a proper Rolls Royce of football. Yeah,
you're absolutely spot on as ever. Matt, let's move on to Chelsea, because it is a big week for them. It was a big win for them actually on Monday night. I thought that was a statement victory against Everton. I know you're at West Ham, but it's it put themselves in pole position by beating a clear rival, and they've got Leeds Saturday, Atletico next week. They're already ahead in that tie, so they've got pole position to go through to the quarters. Thomas Tuchel, blimey, what a record and what a run he's having. It's justified, Matt, isn't it? They're doing great, Chelsea.
All those Frank lovers, I don't know what they're going on about.
What do they know? What do they know?
I'll tell you what's impressed me about Tuchel from the start was he came in, he made no bones about the fact he was in there to get them in the top four. That was what he was told to do. He's basically laid out, well, I'm here to do this, I'll do it my way. And he's gone about and done it. And everyone knows what the target is. Everyone knows you can't let up for a second there. I'm slightly nervous about that 1-0 win against Atletico, because the away goal's now against them. And in these days where home advantage doesn't seem to mean much, it's a narrow lead to take back to Stamford Bridge. And that could come back. It looks on paper as a great result, but that could come back to bite them if they're not on it. And the one thing that Tuchel seems to be doing to his players at the moment is getting them all on it. He's had his spats with Callum Hudson-Odoi. They all seem to have worked out well at the moment. Every decision he makes seems to be working. And a true measure of how good a manager he is and how much tolerance they've got for him at Stamford Bridge comes when they have a lull, which they haven't had yet. So, the proof of that pudding will be in the eating, possibly even next season. But in terms of the running, he's just come in and done exactly what he said he was going to do. The abrasive nature of his character hasn't had time to really gnaw away at the players yet. So he's the sort of manager who does get instant results. But that's what he was brought in to do. I think that the measure of how successful a manager he is going to be at Chelsea come next season, when the players that they spent so much money on last summer have had a year at the club, and he'll be expected to challenge for the title. And that's quite a big expectation still to put on that squad, because although they're putting together some results, I'm not sure they're still at the level of being able to challenge City over a 38-game season.
No. I must say, one of the things that I took away that maybe you don't see if you're watching at home, which fans will miss from not being in the stadium, was the way that Tuchel was on Timo Werner's case so much during the game. Wow, I don't know whether that came across in the TV coverage because it was there. But wow, that was so noticeable, such a big thing, I have to say. And I must say, if they're going to take that next step, Andy, they probably need to improve the strike force, don't they?
Yeah, or Werner needs to improve his finishing.
Point.
It's a good point you make about what you see when you're actually there at the stadium. The last time I saw them live was at Anfield for their win. For their 1-0 win there, and I was mightily impressed by them, and more so because you're there and you're seeing the work that's being done off the ball. The runs are being made off the ball were just absolutely incredible. He's got them playing exactly how he wants to play, the interchange, the fluidity across the front, with Mount and Werner was exceptional. I mean, N'Golo Kante didn't start the other day, did he? But he started against Liverpool, and he was exactly as you would expect vintage N'Golo Kante to be. He just has them very well organised and incredibly. I mean, it looks as though, now this is probably just a because they're doing well and because they're organised and making these runs all over the park, it has the illusion to me that they look fitter. You know, and I don't know whether I don't want to harp on about fitness, etc., but I do think it's becoming a big thing. And I think what you'll find is that Tuchel, long term, you know, the emphasis on how far you run. You know, he's referenced how far Kante run, didn't he? He said he thought the stats were from 2 players, not from 1 player. And I think, you know, you will, and as you say, he was on Werner's case, the game you were at, you will not get away under Thomas Tuchel. I'm not saying that you got away with it under Frank Lampard either, but you certainly will not get away under Thomas Tuchel for not, to use an old-fashioned phrase, putting a shift in, because that was as hard-working, quick, incisive a Chelsea side I've seen for a while when I saw them at Anfield. You know, so from that point of view, and it's interesting you mentioned the sort of, you know, he's had the tete-a-tete with sort of Hudson-Odoi. Well, it wasn't so much that. He sort of basically put down his marker, and Hudson-Odoi has had to fall into line, which I guess what happens when you're a new manager and you know, you've got the full backing of the board. But no, I'm impressed with what he's done. You can't argue with the organisation that he's brought to the team. It just looks a very disciplined, very robust, very quick, decent team. And as you say, you know, if they can find, you know, more goals from the chances they create, and as I say, that might be someone else coming in, that might be Werner capitalising on the outstanding work he does. You know, then, but I mean, because he's so selfless, Werner, in a way, that often happens, doesn't it? If you're making selfless runs. Yeah. You know, and you're not just thinking, well, you know, I'm going to save my energy just to get that one run that might give me a chance. Then maybe that happens. But incredibly impressed. It's hard not to be impressed with what Tuchel's done.
Absolutely.
Do you think they're dark horses for the Champions League? Or is that a bit of a stretch?
To win the trophy? I do. I know I do. I do think that. I do think that, you know, just because Tuchel has brought a new energy and he's got a history and he's got a record in Europe, he's got a pedigree there. I agree that basically this game at the Atletico is not settled. You know, no. Atletico are very good, you know, defensively.
They are, but
so many players. They're getting a few back now.
They don't score, do they?
They were missing serious players. They've been missing serious players. It'd be interesting to see Atletico approach that game because they have to be more ambitious. Well, they do, but we've been here before with Simeone, and he is very good tactically. Every time we write him off as being finished, washed up, and boring, you know, he goes and surprises us, frankly. So there you go. There's an interesting comment from George Cook, actually, who just says, do you see that about Tuchel? I think he means just because fans aren't there, would you notice what Tuchel was doing if it was a packed stadium? Well, the answer to that, George, is that actually, do you know what? On Monday, it was a weird game, and because there were no fans there, you didn't have lack and intensity and a noise and something to drive the players forward. And then for the first half an hour, George, I swear I was thinking, oh, this is so dull. And it was probably actually quite a good quality game. But without fans, without that kind of motivation, that's what you miss. But you do get a silence in the stadium, which then makes it easier to notice Tuchel. And I don't know that that's necessarily, you know, his histrionics on the touchline is picked up on the TV. I don't think, when I watch games where I'm not at, I don't know that, you know, you get those histrionics from the manager, and it's so noticeable with Tuchel. It is with Hasenhüttl as well, actually. It's interesting. Listen, guys, I just want to move on to...
Quickly, John, we just better tell George that at Chelsea we're virtually sat in a dugout anyway, aren't we?
So
even if there's 40,000 people there.
George, points, mate. I don't know. You could actually reach across and literally touch one of the. Yeah, you can literally touch one of the substitutes, because the substitutes are in the sort of in the next block to you. And when I say block, I literally mean the next row of seats. It's strange how these different grounds do different things, but it's been a real eye opener. Listen, Jeremy, I wanted to ask you about Man United, because you've written about this today, and a backroom. I'd like to call it reshuffle, but it feels as if it's not really. Everyone's been given a new title and kind of new responsibility under the heading, if you like. They've probably got a pay rise, let's be honest, new contract, and isn't that how it works? And then basically, but it's all staying the same, isn't it? Let's break it down for us. What's happened?
Yeah, so it's rather complicated, but to cut a long story short, about 2 years ago, Ed Woodward, the executive vice chairman, made it clear they wanted to appoint a director of football. he's been wanting to do it for longer than that, actually. But when Jose was manager, he basically refused to accept one. So they had to shelve that plan until they got rid of Mourinho. So 2 years in the making, we've seen a host of names mentioned from various places around the world. Edwin van der Sar was one that was heavily linked with the jobs. He's done such a great job at Ajax. And obviously he has strong links to United. So fans were, getting excited about who could be coming in this, what is a crucial role. And then obviously United make a big announcement yesterday that it's going to be a guy who's already been there 7 years, who no one really has ever heard of. So it was quite underwhelming, really. United seemed convinced that this guy is the man to do that role, and it's a huge job for him. So Darren Fletcher's obviously been promoted as well. He'll stay on the coaching staff until the end of the season, then switch roles. And look, I've got nothing against John Murtagh or Darren Fletcher. Both good guys, been involved in football a long time. Obviously, Darren had a great career at United. But it just all felt a bit of a damp squib. Do these guys have the gravitas needed for that role? Probably not. Let's give them a chance. But I suppose Ed Woodward is trying to share the workload, dilute his own role a little bit, and he's decided to go for Murtagh. Now, my first thought was, he's on a hiding to nothing, John Murtagh, because he will now be responsible for transfers. And if those transfers don't work, he'll be like a human shield for Ed Woodward, basically.
Yeah.
He'll take the blast from the critics and deflect it all from Woodward, who ultimately signs the cheques with the Glazers' permission, of course. So it's an interesting sort of complex narrative about how it's going to work. But having waited for them to appoint someone for a long, long time, it all just felt a bit of a anticlimax.
Yeah, it's a bit weird, the Darren Fletcher thing. I have to say, it's just I just don't, sort of kind of coming from playing. Everyone says what a great guy he is, which he absolutely, in sort of kind of conversations, you've probably seen him after dinner speaking and stuff. Comes across brilliantly, coaching, and then elevated into this role. I can't quite work that out. Are you doing it because he's viewed as, a United figurehead, or are you doing it because he has knowledge and nous and expertise in that role?
I think it's partly because Solskjaer absolutely is really close with him.
Is he? Right.
Yeah, and whenever you mention Darren Fletcher's name to Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, he reveres about him generally. Right. He just talks so enthusiastically about him, holds him in such high esteem. And you have to trust that Solskjaer is right. I mean, we don't know the inner workings of a complex club like United. It's such a massive club with 1,000 staff. But, what always staggers me about United is they're always reluctant to go look out of the box. Do you know what I mean? Look, do something left field. They're like, it's like a chain of command. It's like a regurgitation of people who've already been there in a previous role. Look at Solskjaer, he's now the manager. He's doing a half decent job, but ex-player, now a manager. It's just a bit. I think it's a bit limited in terms of their vision.
Should they have gone outside? Should they have gone out? It never felt you might be, you might prove me wrong here, but it never felt they were particularly close to getting from anyone from outside. There was talk about Paul Mitchell, but I always felt that came from Paul Mitchell. I don't know. It didn't. I
think it would have been nice to see someone from outside come in, because it's a fresh pair of eyes on an institution. What is an institution? And you've got to remember, people like Fletcher and Murtagh have already been embedded in the United way, so they have a certain way of working and looking at things. Whereas a fresh pair, like a Van der Sar, for example, can bring new ideas in and come look at things from a different angle.
But I agree with you. The thing is, John, if I understand what you're saying, if you think, bringing in someone outside would be bringing in someone outside Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, and it's very interesting what Jeremy says about the relationship Solskjaer has with Fletcher. That's clearly key to all this, and clearly he's developed a relationship with Murtagh as well, and clearly they all work well together, which is why Ed Woodward has now formalised that working relationship. No, he doesn't want. He can't. Edward, listen, the guy in charge. To me, I look at that and I think Ed Woodward is more in charge than he's ever been.
Right.
I look at that and I think, well, hang on a minute.
He can control everything, can't he?
Absolutely, the two people who directly answer, who directly go to Ed Woodward will be Merto and Solskjaer, I assume. And that is, he's in control. And also, if you bring in a name from outside, then that automatically brings in a dynamic of, Solskjaer is still, while he is still Manchester United manager, he's still not a big name manager as such, is he? I mean, let's get that right. He's still not what you would call one of the elite coaching cabal, the Tuchels, the Marinos, the Guardiolas, the Nagelmans, even the Klopps, etc., the Pochettinos. He's still not considered one of those type of coaches. Hopefully he will be in time if it works out for him. So if you bring in someone, who's been around doing that director of football thing alongside him, then it can undermine him. This in no way, yes, these appointments might well be underwhelming to the outsider, underwhelming maybe to a lot of Manchester United fans. But what they are is they don't undermine the manager. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer is still there. You still get the feeling he has the final say on tactics, the final say on the way Manchester United played, the final say on transfers. So that's what basically Ed Woodward is. To me, this is a huge vote of confidence in Solskjaer. It really is. This tells me that Woodward genuinely thinks, this is long term. I mean, this triumvirate of Solskjaer, Merto, and Fletcher is long term. Whether or not it'll have the success that United should be having, I'm really not sure.
No.
But this is what
it screams, doesn't it? We've got our man, basically. Listen, guys, I'm gonna move on to the North London derby on Sunday. Matt, you and I are both there, I know. Listen, it used to be a bit of a heavyweight clash, this in recent times. I mean, sort of. Well, it felt like it did. It felt like it used to be in recent years. It used to be a battle for top four, and now it feels
featherweight clash.
I think Spurs has still got a chance of top four, if I'm honest. What I find staggering, Matt, what I find absolutely staggering is Arsenal fans at the moment. And maybe it's refreshing, actually. Maybe it's a good thing that basically they are not more upset about being marooned in mid-table. Because make no mistake about it, under George Graham, they wouldn't have settled for it. Under Arsene Wenger, they wouldn't settle for it. But they bought into it under Mikel Arteta. And what's your take on it? Why have Arsenal's kind of expectations sort of changed a little bit?
Forget the points. I do like delving into the stats, as you know, a little bit.
Yes.
And 27 games into a season, they've never had fewer goals this century than they have at the moment. So
we're only 21 years into it, I would say.
Sorry, 27 games
21
into the season. Oh, at this stage of the season.
Yeah.
This century, they've never had fewer goals at this stage of the season.
Yeah.
So they're not only not winning games, but they're being boring. And I thought that was what Arsenal, it doesn't matter if we don't get the results. It's all about playing the entertaining football. Well, okay, it might be entertaining, but it's the Andy Dunn entertainment where you get lots of passes, but no end product.
Why bring me into that?
just remembering all your passing stats from before. But no, I mean, they're not scoring goals. They don't particularly. There's no one there. When I go to watch Arsenal, on the occasions that you might actually play and turn up, you might go and watch Mesut Ozil. When you go to Spurs, you want to go and watch Gareth Bale now, as a neutral. You want to perhaps even go and see Dele Alli if he's playing. Who, apart from Saka to a limited degree, who in that Arsenal team are you going to watch?
Saka to a limited degree.
I think he's on his way.
Saka is one of the best. He's arguably the best young player in the country.
Yeah, I think.
And I take that into. Right.
I think he needs to do it a few more times.
I think he's so consistent. He's the one that's bailing Arsenal out.
He's the one sort of light at the end of the tunnel. I think he's the saving grace. I do think he's a fantastic player, but with so many bright young players burst onto the scene with a bit of pace and look like world beaters, and then don't quite make it. Arsenal seem to have had several of those over the years. Theo Walcott was never a bad player, but he never quite was the player that we hoped he'd be as a youngster. Then it's that sort of player, the Aaron Lennons of this world, who you think when they first start out, we're going to be talking about this guy for decades, and actually don't quite make that. Saka is started off on the same trajectory. If he can accelerate away like he does accelerate away from defenders and keep doing it, then he'll be the mainstay of the England team, hopefully, for the next 10 years. But it's still early days. But he's the one player, I don't think yet you go and see him on his own. He's not the price of admission, as the old phrase goes. But Arsenal don't have any of those players. I don't know who you go and watch. Aubameyang can score goals, but can also miss them. And that's the problem. There's no one exciting about. There's nothing exciting about Arsenal at the moment.
No, I do agree with you. I must say they've become a boring watch under Wenger. Everyone knows that had to finish and come to an end, but they entertained you. They sort of kind of set out to entertain and pass the ball and move it, and under Arteta it feels so clunky, so so robotic. It does, It's
going to be robotic. If you get rid of players like, without being funny, if you get rid of players like Mesut, it's going to feel robotic. That's what you want, isn't it? You don't want anyone mercurial or anyone with
You want him to do it 38 games a season to justify the price of admission, not just twice.
Well, maybe, but now you're accusing us of being robotic and one-dimensional, and you get rid of a player who's two-dimensional. I think I just wonder though, John, whether or not you say fans sort of now accept this. Well, not say accept it, but they're not kicking up as much of a fuss about being in mid-table as they might have done in the past. I do think, overall, looking from the outside, you think, well, there's also an element that, it's going to be tough to get back to that situation which they were decried for, of course, at the time, permanent top four fixtures. Everyone took the mickey out of Wenger for essentially, finishing top four every single season. I don't know how many was on the spin, but it was an awful lot, wasn't it? And now that's not going to be that. If you look at it, if you're an Arsenal fan or you're a neutral, realistically, you look at it and you think, hang on a minute, this is going to be tough because there are a number of sides now who are improving and who have financial backing. All of a sudden, a team like, for example, like Everton, I've got a great manager. They're probably improving a little bit, but they've also got the backing of, ironically, Fahad Mashiri, who probably, was in some way connected with Arsenal, and all of a sudden now, Everton is an attractive destination for a player. Leicester City have got a good financial bank, a good manager, a good setup, just opened a new training facility, which is, world class, like so many clubs are now. So all of a sudden, they're a viable alternative to Arsenal. There are more viable alternatives to a club like Arsenal now than there ever have been. And we haven't even started them with Liverpool, Manchester City, Manchester United, Chelsea, Spurs. All of a sudden now we're talking 8, 9, almost 10 clubs. Look at West Ham. They've got a 60,000 seater stadium, again with good financial backing, and that might change if in the not too distant future the current ownership sell up. Can you imagine who they would sell to and then put money into that club? So I think long term, the issues are for Stan Kroenke and for the Arsenal board, and to think, how are we going to compete now to make sure we get back to the days that, as I say, we were pilloried for, when top four finish, wasn't exactly a brilliant, but at least it got us there every season.
I used to go out in the open top bus every year. So
yes.
Just going back to Saka, do you think he'll still be at Arsenal next season?
Next season, yes.
Do you?
I don't. If I'm brutally honest, I don't think so long term, because you can't. I mean, it's just an absolute jewel. I mean, my point is this: that basically, I think that of this. Who are the best two young players in the country at the moment who stand out by an absolute mile? I think, and I'm talking young players in the country, because Jude Bellingham's in Dortmund. I think fabulous generational talent there, slightly different, obviously.
But it depends what you mean by young, I guess, isn't it?
Of their type. Well, Foden's 20, and I mean Phil Foden, and I mean Saka.
Is he not your
And I just think the reason I go for Saka over Foden, who I think is unbelievably exciting, by the way, brilliant, is because Saka is just doing it week in, week out, saving his team every single game. Honestly, his talent is unbelievable.
Do you think if he carries on playing at this level between now and the Euros, if you were Southgate, would you start him in the team?
Oh, Jeremy, I wouldn't just start him. I've been playing him up front, as part of the front three, because at the moment I think he's penciled in for left wing back. And I know we've had this Luke Shaw love, but one thing that Gareth Southgate is loyal. And so basically, Gareth Southgate, will have heard the noise and watched, sort of Shaw producing brilliant performances, best form for a long, long time, and said, well, actually, yeah, great, I'll get him in the squad, and that'll be a good option. But to me, Gareth Southgate sticks with Saka because he's been loyal to him and been good for him, and basically he's been outstanding at left wing back. The bigger dilemma for me is that when you break down that front three, I mean, Sancho missed the qualifiers later this month. I think Saka's in the conversation because he's just sensational. He really is.
On the right, John, or
well, you could play him either side. I feel
Raheem Sterling's quite a man to get past, isn't he?
Well, he is, but Sterling is often quite effective from the left, cutting in, and vice versa. Well,
he's playing injured actually. So
I tell you what, Rashford needs a break.
Well, he's been flogged to death.
Yeah, he's ridiculous.
Same as Maguire.
He's 45 games, Rashford.
Yeah,
he looks dead on his feet.
41.
He needs. Maybe this injury might give him a little bit of a break.
Yeah,
because he needs it. He's needs a break from saving the country, let alone playing Man United. Frankly,
he has plenty of breaks within games itself. By the way, from what I've seen of Rashford over the last 2 or 3 months, he's had plenty of breaks during an actual match. So I don't think he actually needs games off. For goodness' sake, he used to play 60-odd games a season. I mean, that's what the Liverpool side won the league in the 60s. I've told you they used 14 players all season. Have I ever told you that stat?
What about Aston Villa? What about Aston Villa? Yeah, Aston Villa won the league.
14 players all season.
Do you know what?
By the way, that's in all competitions.
That standard of football, that speed of football has got no relevance to today, by the way. So,
sorry?
That speed and style of football has got no relevance to today, by the way.
How can it have no relevance? It's the same game.
I'm not sure that it is. Honestly,
really?
Yeah, really. This is one for another. This is one for another week because I want to talk about now the battle to beat the drop, and basically I wanted to express some Fulham love because everyone's got a soft spot. I think for Fulham if you live in London, haven't they? Well, I don't know. Maybe not if you support Chelsea. I don't know. But basically, who is now most at risk by Scott Parker's remarkable resurgence? I mean, talk about getting the best out of loan players, Andy. But no, who is most at risk? Brighton or Newcastle? Brighton fed up of being patronised a little bit. Don't they play well? Aren't they wonderful football when they're not winning matches? Newcastle? Well, let's discuss. Who's most at risk, guys? Who do we think?
I think it's a toss of a coin between Brighton and Newcastle. And Brighton have won one game at home all season.
Crazy.
I know what you're saying about patronising and everything. And they're a great club. They're helpful. They are accommodating. Potter's a great guy. They play some good stuff. But ultimately, it's about winning games. And they have not won enough games. I mean, if one game summed them up, it was losing to Leicester. They went ahead, lost at the death. They sort of encapsulated their season, really. They've produced some good stuff. But to win one game at home all season, I don't know if that's an issue with not having any fans there. I don't know, but it's just and they have got quite a tough running as well. So, but then you look at Newcastle, where do you start with Newcastle? I mean, clearly there are issues going on left, right, and centre. We saw the story, didn't we, about Bruce having a fight with an altercation, shall we say, with Matt Ritchie, who apologised afterwards. Bruce looks and acts like a man. I've got a look-alike Steve Bruce, but he's now acting and looking like a man under severe pressure. And they're obviously missing their injuries are mounting up, and Callum Wilson's injured still. He's their main threat for goals. So they have got, and I just checked actually. They've got a run of games in April to play Spurs, West Ham, Liverpool, Arsenal, Leicester, and Man City. Now, on paper, you can't see them getting a point from those games. So that could be what finishes Newcastle off actually, because you think Fulham have got the momentum now. They've won 3 of the last 6 games, beat Liverpool obviously last time out. Got a great belief in Parker, very resilient, full of character. So I fancy Fulham to survive. Newcastle actually play Fulham, don't they, on the last game of the season?
Oh, what a game that is! What a game that is! And we talk about the rows about the fans. Yeah, I'll tell you what. Our friend Alan Chamberlain's back actually with a very good point. Brighton have missed Tariq Lamptey so much. Another great young talent. He's right, you know. He's absolutely right.
And Lallana.
And Lallana. Yeah, Lallana's just
Well,
not
really,
got it together, is he?
Yeah.
He's just
No,
not
if you could keep him fit between now and the end of the season,
Well,
I
that's
think
the trouble.
we
Brighton
The
might-
biggest thing for me is goals.
Yeah.
Yeah, they've not got a goal scorer. They really haven't. Listen, guys, I do want to shine a light on the Champions League reforms. I mean, it was a topic of discussion yesterday at European Leagues meeting. It's very interesting, the points that, you know, Steve Parish and sort of Christian Purslow from Palace and Villa respectively sort of raised. Look, you know, we all know it's happening, but it's just whether they can kind of claw anything back. I guess it's definitely happening. Make no bones about that. But it's just, you know, the Swiss model, has it got its merits? Are they doing the right thing, guys? Or are they destroying English football as we know it? Who wants to take
I
it?
think, like all things from Swiss model, it's got massive great holes in it, isn't it? It's like the cheese. You know, you can't run a system on that. It was introduced in the late 1900s. I've been doing a bit of research for competitions of bridge, Scrabble, and chess. That's what it's designed for. It's not a football competition where it's all about competing on the pitch. It's about, you know, it's just a complete farce that they're trying to organise a system where no one will know. Managers complain about anything, but to complain that they've had an easy lot of fixtures compared to somebody else having, you know, tougher fixtures on the luck of a draw. You can't draw up a league table when you've only played half the teams. You know, that for a start is wrong in football. It's all about integrity of the competition, and you have to beat everybody else. So that's completely wrong for starters. We all know it's an excuse to try and hive off a couple of places for those with a decent coefficient. So the big clubs get looked after. So it couldn't have been a better week than the one in which Juventus and Barcelona crashed out at quarter-final stages. Because there are no guarantees in football, and nor should there be. I think the whole thing's just ill-conceived. No one will understand it. And is there that much appetite? How many away trips can fans afford to go to? We talk about this season, you know, reminding us how it's all about the fans in the stadiums, you know, bringing it home. But how many away trips, how many away group games do you need? And you'll pick and choose, and you won't go to those that aren't the big ones. And, you know, it just sounds like there's going to be, it's all for broadcasters. You know, it's going to eat into the domestic competitions. It's just more European football than I think we need. I think the excitement about what European football says to me, it's the best clubs in the continent competing against each other, you know, to see who the best is, not to see who the 35th and 36th best team in the continent is. I just think
it is as well.
It's just greed. It's pure.
It's greed. That's the bottom line. Is it's 100 more games, 4 more European fixtures before Christmas. I mean, you speak to any manager, and most of them will advocate a break at Christmas just because the season is so demanding. These players, alluded to earlier, playing so many games. I know they're young and fit and all that, but there's only so much they can take. Talking about piling more games on teams and players, pushing them to even greater limits. But it's all equates to more games equals more money, more sponsorship, more broadcast revenue, more money in the pot. And that's what it all boils down to, money.
Yeah. I think the current group system is dying. I think that does need an overhaul.
We covered down the years that have just felt meaningless.
Absolutely. So we need to rejig that. And I do think there's logic in this, but I totally get the point because it will kill the League Cup.
Well, Steve
kill the League Cup.
Steve Parish spoke very well about that. It forms a third of the income for the EFL. So what impact would that have on?
No, I totally agree.
But let's face it, there have been a lot of people trying to kill a League Cup for many, many years. You know,
Man City. Man City don't they win every year.
Certain sections of our industry included. I mean, let's face it, the League Cup hasn't had any sort of, you know, real support. And the problem you've got with this, I agree with everything that everyone has said here. But what I would say, looking at it realistically, the problem that you have to address, I think we would all agree, yes, they're doing it because they want more games, more money, more TV revenue, blah, 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 blah. Yes, and yes. However, the issue they're going to have is that tell our clubs, tell Manchester City, tell Manchester United, tell Liverpool that this isn't required. You know, you have to tell the big clubs around Europe that this is a bad idea, because the fact is they will not listen. Most of them will not listen. Some might, but a lot of them will not listen to this idea, and they will want, in one shape or form, the big clubs want a bigger slice of the pie, and that they might not agree with this particular system, but that applies to English clubs as well. We all know they want a bigger slice of football's revenue because they think they're entitled to it because they are the big clubs. So whether that be Man United and Liverpool or Barcelona or AC Milan or Juventus, they're thinking, hang on, we're the teams that put the figures to the television, and we want a bigger slice of that. And that underpins the entire. That's why we're always talking about breakaway leagues, Champions League expansions, new European leagues. Project Big Picture, you name it. We've had them all, haven't we? Over as if someone's been particularly bored over this lockdown.
It's a cabal,
and they are all these big clubs are forever exploring how they can get more money from commercials and revenues, and they will just keep doing that. And they're the issues that we need to have. I'm not saying that English clubs would be particularly in favour of this model, but they will want one model down the line that guarantees them more income. Let's face it.
But Andy, I think the British clubs, the English clubs, they're quite happy perhaps trying to go for a bigger slice of the domestic pie, which is a lot bigger than the pies they've got in other countries, if we're going to keep that colouring method going. They've always preferred, I think, ultimately, when push comes to shove, to stick with the Premier League and keep raking off that amount of money. A lot of the pressure here is coming from Italy, who earn a load less than the Premier League clubs, just want some of what the Premier League are doing all across Europe. I just don't think that the English clubs, they're certainly not leading the way. They might get dragged into it if the money's right, but there's no real will from the people I've spoken to join in with Europe in quite such a way, which I think is the one saving grace for football, is that actually the Premier League clubs, if anything, are putting something of a break on all this, because the Spanish clubs, with what's going on over there, are going to be desperate for money. And Bayern Munich are desperate for competition. So, that's where all the push is coming from.
Matt,
and I think the Premier League clubs, but they might demand money from the rest of the Premier League clubs to stay, which is when it all starts getting a bit nervous.
Matt, if you wanted a slice of a pie, what flavour would you want that pie to be?
Don't all this talk about pies. All this chicken about pies is making me incredibly hungry. But listen, guys, I'm going to finish with our finally one at the end here, and talk about, because we got so worked up about it before the start of the show, which I guarantee you Andy's column will be very good tomorrow.
Got off that.
Let's talk about TV. Let's talk about TV. And I don't think any of us have ever watched quite so many football games and televised football and football television as much as we have in the last 9 months or so, really, or 6 months, I should maybe say. So who is your favourite commentator, pundit, interviewer, and why? Come on, let's start.
Can I go first before I've done it?
Please.
Well, he's not on as often as he should be, but in my opinion, the best pundit to watch is Patrice Evra. I just think he's so entertaining, compelling, passionate, like he was as a player, actually, a wonderful player for Man United and Juventus, but he's emblematic of what a pundit should be in 2021, in my opinion. He almost reduces himself to tears sometimes when he gets on one. And he posts all these things on social media that are a bit wacky, slightly unhinged. I think he'd disagree with me saying that, but he's my favourite pundit to watch. There are a lot of good pundits. I think Carragher's growing into the role. Mika Richards, I've spoke about him before. He's developing some good skills on TV. But we've seen some terrible pundits down the years, haven't we? Just Thierry. Well, Thierry on me. God, he's just so stale and boring. Yeah, they're paid lots of money to give opinions. Yeah. That's what their job is, to give their opinions, whether people like it or not. Make people talk about the game. That's what football's all about, opinion. We might always agree with them, but that's not the point. So Evra, for me, takes it.
Yeah, you've got to be willing, I think, to criticise sort of your former team, and what have you. We got onto this with Ian Wright actually, but basically, why on earth he's having to apologise to Lacazette for raising a very, very valid argument is beyond me. It's great, I think, when basically, the fans are all talking about the screaming of the players. It's embarrassing. So I think it's great that pundits sort of be critical. So
they single out one particular player.
No, I did. Well, it could have been any player that week. I do agree with your wider point, but anyway, you're saving that for your column. So, but what
I will do, Cross, is when you're talking about pundits and about whatever, I will use that particular sort of scenario, because the reason why that happened on Match of the Day, the reason why, in a way, Lacazette then got singled out, and as you know, they all finished off, didn't they? With this scenario of them all screaming and whatever. It's because they wanted a payoff line. Right, that's what they wanted. A Match of the Day has become, and Gary Lineker, brilliant as he is, I mean, every program now needs a payoff line. Have you noticed this? It's a bit like when you're writing a match report or whatever, you want a payoff line. So they always want a payoff line. They can't just go, all right, okay, and that's it for today. Good night. Have a nice night's rest. And here's the goal that won the game today. There has to be a payoff now. And that has existed for a long time. We think that. We can't just end our reports with a full stop and say, right, that's it. For some reason, we think we need a clever, funny line to pay off. And sometimes it works. And Match a Day in particular.
And sometimes the sub gets it, yeah.
Yeah, but what I mean, and Lineker's been particularly good at this, hasn't he, with payoff lines. This is the way to end the programme. It wraps it up and whatever. The problem you've got is that if you look for that for every single time you do the show, which they do, there's going to be a time when you make a misjudgment. And I genuinely think that was a misjudgment to end the show with basically ridiculing all three pundits, ridiculing one man who happened to scream the same way that other players have screamed, including the likes of Harry Kane, etc. I don't think it would have been. I think certain players would have been spared the individual ridicule that Lacazette was given. But that all came from the payoff line, which brings me to Jimmy Hill, the great man. And Jimmy was just, brilliant to me. One of the original presenters, pundits, again, paved the way in that industry, in the same way that he paved the way in terms of players' wages, and brilliant, and very few will ever live up to Jimmy. But obviously, those of us who were lucky to actually do a couple of shows with Jimmy, when he took over and the program on Sky became Jimmy Hill Sunday Supplement. Now he fell into this trap as well of wanting a payoff line for every program, right? And that was it. Now, as you well can remember, it was Jimmy, Brian Woolnough, God rest his soul, and a couple of journalists. And it's based in, the set was Jimmy Hill's kitchen. So the pretense, the construct, as you would call it, is Jimmy's kitchen. To the extent where you would go out covering the game and someone would come to you and say, what's the rest of Jimmy's house like? And you would say, look, it's really not Jimmy's kitchen. You know what I mean? The weather hasn't been the same outside Jimmy's kitchen window for 2.5 years. This really isn't his kitchen. So and it would be, but Jimmy would try and keep up that pretense. So his payoff line at the end, in the same way that Match of the Day used to be, right, guys, this is really interesting, but there's the guy at the door of my newspapers, we must go. And then that was it. Okay, Jimmy, that's a good payoff line. The next week, he would say, right, guys, it's been great. Oh, that's someone knocked at the door. It must be Mrs. So-and-so next door wants a cup of sugar. And that was the whole pretense of the thing, the payoff line, whatever. And then one week, he said, guys, I've got to cut you short. I must go and baste my meat, right? And everyone burst out laughing in a childish sort of innuendo way. The whole, and whatever. And never again did that happen. And that was because he was searching for the ultimate payoff line. And it didn't work. And I just think going back to that, it seems going back to that, is if you look for a payoff line, and they were looking for that, and it didn't work with Lacazette. I thought it held them up to... He held them up to accusations which they got, which I'm not sure that Wright should apologise for that they ridiculed Lacazette unnecessarily.
Yeah, there you go. Matt, come on then, follow that. And be quick, please, because I've got to go.
Oh, you got to. Sorry, mate.
Hearing Andy talking about Jimmy Hill liking a payoff line, I know he liked to pay off because I once had to pay him £2,000 for something I wrote about him. But
right, brilliant. We'll revisit that next week.
I was given the option. I didn't want to be controversial on this one, so I just wanted to use this as an excuse to pay tribute to my favourite commentator still, who remains Barry Davis in amongst all the different voices we hear these days. It's a simple one. Anyone who's, obviously a great football commentator, but became iconic for his hockey commentary with Where Are the Germans? Frankly, who cares? And anyone who's seen the 43rd annual World Stare Out Championships, see a commentator on his masterclass, worth a YouTube there. His commentary to that is absolutely remarkable, and it is a lesson to modern commentators of when you don't have to speak at all, which I think is something that a lot of commentators still still have to learn. We can see a lot of what's happening, which is what sort of annoys me about some of the punditry as well. I want a pundit who points out things that I haven't spotted. I remember Gary Neville once on a Monday Night Football explaining how a goal had been conceded because the left fullback was out of position. So the centre-back was 10 yards further across, and then his fellow centre-back had been pulled out of position, which meant they could attack down the right flank. This was something that Fergie would have explained to him at some point in his past, and that's the sort of technical knowledge that I want to see, that I wouldn't necessarily get from the game. Not just someone saying, oh, he squeals a lot, doesn't he? Because we can all hear that.
No, I agree.
Anyway, so Barry Davis, best commentator, and too much obvious punditry should be kicked out.
Should be banned. Guys, thanks so much. Really nice to see you all. Yeah, I haven't got time for a payoff, so I'm going to love you and leave you and see you back here next week. Take care, boys.
Ta-da.